Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson, and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide players, viewers, fans with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. Generally, we get these questions in two forms, either live on the YouTube chat, which you may be on and looking at on the right. I see some of you are there already. Alan's there. And also... Oh, TNSASTD, I don't know your real name, but you've had some great questions already, so that's fun that we've got you back. I hope you see that we answered some of your questions before, a couple weeks ago. Yes, so you can do that. You can participate in the chat on the right of the screen, but you can also send me questions in advance, and I get some very good questions in advance. Got some good ones this week. And you can send me games also in advance. The best way to do that is at my email, askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON at CHESSCLUB.com. So askimwatson@chessclub.com. IM is for International Master. You can also send a message to, if you're an ICC member, to John L. Watson. So message space John L. Watson and put the question or comment or whatever you want to send. So basically we talk about strategy, we talk about openings, a lot about openings. We look at chess books and videos. You can also just make comments of things you want to hear on the air, and I'll comment on them, but some opinions of yours or things you've been thinking about. And you can send me games. We have a game this week. In fact, I was even going to start with a game. And I was also going to mention that I think, although people don't seem to be doing it mostly, you can comment or ask a question in the comment section below the YouTube. These shows are all archived. And so below the screen, which you see before you, once this show is recorded and archived, you can put some comments on there and put a question there. And that's kind of a lazy way to do it. That's because it's right in front of you right after you've seen the show. Okay, so I think that's it for the introduction. We have some people on. I see there's a good question here about a couple good questions. And okay, you like the English defense, TNSASTD does. And Alan wants to know about the term Indian. Well, okay, I'll do that first. I do want to get, today's going to be a good day for getting to things that people have sent me, but let's just start out, since you're on the chat, let's talk about that. What does the term Indian refer to? Yes, it refers to the setup of the bishop, or whatever it was. It was a bishop, basically, I believe. It was then fianchettoed, and a knight in front. Okay, yeah, in the old Indian game. That's right, in the old game from India. But that explained the Bogo Indian and Nimzo Indian. Well, Bogolyubov was a world championship candidate twice. He played Alekhine twice. He was one of the best players in the world. He won Moscow 1925, a hugely powerful tournament, and played for a long, long time, all the way into the 50s for the German Olympiad team. Or I think for the Olympiad team. But anyway, he was in Germany and after the war, and was still a very strong player. So that was Efim Bogolyubov. There's some great books about him. There's a great CD on him, actually, CD sort of biography. And the Nimzo Indian is for Nimzovich, who you've probably heard of. That's Aaron Nimzovich, who wrote My System and wrote Chess Praxis and was one of the top players in the world, and in fact came very close to playing a world championship match with Alekhine. The timing was a little funny, but he had just won a very important tournament. He did very well in the late 20s and was a pretty much natural candidate, but then there was always someone maybe a little better or a little more appropriate. It would have been fun to see him at a world championship. So two extremely strong players, and Bogolyubov. It's not that Bogolyubov invented the Bogo Indian, but I believe he played it. And the Nimzo Indian was really made popular by Nimzovich himself. Okay. Oh, neither seems to have the Indian setup. Good point. Excellent point. Yeah. Why are those called Indians? Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about this for a second. Basically, it's because they are d4, d5, which has completely dominated practice for so long. This was just black played d5 almost automatically. So let me think about that for a second. Of course, this is the King's Indian, so you would understand that because there's your fianchetto. Why would the Nimzo Indian be called? Yeah, I guess just the fact that it isn't d4, d5. That's fantastic. Oh, well, actually, though, the Nimzo Indian with Nimzovich came very often in conjunction with the Queen's Indian kind of setup with b6. He played b6 early on. in countless games. So he would play there, but he would then play b6 a lot of times, either now or a little later. So there's one Indian-ish sort of system. And I guess you could say that about the Bogo Indian too. I think we'd be stretching it a little bit. The Queen's Indian, you can see, is an Indian system because the bishop's on b7. So it's a great question. I don't know where the Indian aspect of it comes from. That's the Bogo Indian, by the way. And you know, maybe you're going to follow up later with that, but I have to admit that's a little bit shaky. So good question. TNRSS ASTD said, I watched and adapted your repertoire about the black pieces in the ICC video series, and however, instead of the Chigoran, I prefer that. Well, okay, that's fine. He's saying he prefers the English defense, which we've actually talked about quite a bit on this show, which can start with either c4 or d4. Actually, if you're going to play, maybe I'll give you a little tip here. I talk quite a bit about this in some lectures, and I've written about it quite a bit. And a couple of my students play this. If you're going to play against c4, just so you know, then you can play b6 and get into English defense and avoid certain lines. For example, if you play the strictly speaking English defense with this order, you can't stop e4. But if you play c4 b6, just something to know, now white can't get e4 in by force, or at least he can't protect it. He can't get all the moves in involving e4 and d4 because he has to defend this at this point. And you can play c5, for example, or you can say he's already had to play knight c3. You may, for example, think that this line is perfectly fun. It's sort of the main line, the old main line of the English defense. So, and what's the difference? The difference is that after this order, with c4, b6, d4, e6, for example, without bishop b7, then this move is considered more difficult for black to handle. So against c4, you can play b6 right away. Now against d4, as you say, you can't really play b6 right away unless you're willing to play the so-called Owen's defense, which, you know, there's books about this. There's a recent book by Lakdawala, a big book on how to play this position, but it's considered not very good overall. So you really can't play b6 right away, and that's why you're playing your order, which is this way. And we can talk about that. You can ask a specific question. What's your opinion? Yeah. If d4, you have a yes, which is an urban, and a lot of people do that. In fact, I was asked last week also about this move. That's another thing people who are French players like to do. They like to say, okay, I'm willing to play a French, but if you're not going to let me, I'm going to play either the English defense, that's what some of my students play, or some people play the Bogo there. They play a version of the Bogo, and often with a5. That's Einhorn's suggestion in his book, and I think there's a couple other books that recommend that order. Of course, you can always just play a regular Indian system, speaking of Indian systems, or you can play the Queen's Gambit declined, or you can play the Benoni. So there's all sorts of options. But the two, most interesting sort of irregular options are b6 and bishop b4 check. So the question is, what's my opinion? Well, I've written about it extensively, and I've played it myself quite a bit, and had pretty good luck. I think, hey, hi, Big Karpov. I think this line with e4 is a problem. I have to admit it. Now, you know, Short has played this a bunch recently, and it has some other good players. It's not like you can't play this line. My students still play this position, but it's a little bit difficult because this famous line here doesn't work very well. This is good for white. Now, white has to know a ton of theory. It's very, very complicated. This line is very famous. And after check here, and actually white, it's a mistake to take this knight now, oddly enough. It's amazingly enough, but because black ends up with material and a pretty good position. And there's huge amounts of theory with bishop g5 and knight e2 and sometimes knight d2, and black takes it goes on and on and on. And you may know all this. But because you can't really play that line as black against a knowledgeable opponent, you have to play something else. This is an interesting move, double fianchettoing. Most common, I would say, is setting up this kind of, just setting up a very simple position like that. Oh, and also the second most common is this, where you can win the bishop pair. I hope I'm not going too fast here. Why do you win the bishop pair? Because he has to protect that. And if he has to protect that, you can make this move, and now you'll notice the bishop has nowhere to go, because if the bishop retreats this way, you win this pawn. So you can win the bishop pair. The only problem is white has a huge space advantage. And in fact, more popular for white is doing the exact same thing except putting the knight here to defend that d-pawn, and then playing here. And now after black takes that, white's ahead in development and space, and also can play this move f4, which you couldn't do when your knight was there. And white's considered somewhat better here. On the other hand, I've played this as black. This is definitely just a game. You can play this. You have to kind of, you should study a little bit to see what kind of setup you want to play and how you want to play it. But it's a perfectly legitimate line. And but black, I have to admit, white's a little better here. Of course, white's a little better in quite a bit of chess, so it's sort of a question of what you want to do. If you want to keep going with that, you can tell me what you like to do in those positions. There we go. Black ideas. Okay, let me just see. Oh, thanks, Jordan. Whoa, okay, a lot of things. Let's keep going here. I won't show you anything yet, and then I'll show you some games. I got sent a game by somebody. And also have some great questions from last week. Elliot Winslow's question about the dragon, I looked into in a fair amount of depth, which is funny because I'm not much of a dragon guy, but I found some fascinating things. What's the best minor piece to defend against two connected passed pawns? I like bishops. Now, theoretically, if you've got them adjacent, and one of them is in front of the other, and you put your knight on the, well, for example, let's just show you this for a second. If the pawns are like, okay, these are not connected past pawns, but so let's do something with them. Let's play here. Let me see here. Whoops. How are we going to do this? I'm doing everything wrong. Wait. let me get rid of some of these. Let's make some of these guys as black. Let's make them pass pawns. We'll go here, for example. Here, and there or something. Okay, so there's two pass pawns. Basically, if one of them's advanced, it's very nice to have a knight on that square, isn't it? Because it's really holding back both pawns. But in general, in an ending, which is what you're talking about probably, a bishop can stop two connected passed pawns very nicely. Because if one of them moves, you just hook on the colors of the one that you just hook on the opposite color of where the pawns are. So I would say a bishop. But that's both pieces are fine in different contexts. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, let's just keep going with this. I do want to show a game someone sent me and some other stuff, so we'll do that and a really good question. Okay, so I mentioned this line. You can also play knight d2. And the idea, first of all, is if white takes this at some point, that's a nice cramping pawn. It stops this knight from coming to these squares. And it opens this file. So you've got some play to make up for the fact that really white has a kind of preponderance in the center. Usually white plays g3 systems against this kind of thing. The other idea is that white has to make moves. White has to kind of develop. So let's say he goes here or something like that. Now there are a lot of different ways for black to develop here. So there's different structures. One of the structures he does is he figures these guys are going to be exchanged, and he plays d6 and e5. That's very popular. Maybe with the queen on e7, for example. But sometimes black will also play this move d5 and just go ahead and allow his pawns to be on light squares, even though that's theoretically a bad bishop, because it's pretty easy to get a bad bishop outside and into play early in the game. You can also just play with this and put your bishop out here. One of the ideas of playing the bishop out here early is maybe you're going to wait a little to put your knight out. If you play knight f6, you're back in a normal Bogo Indian. This kind of position is sort of a normal Bogo Indian position. So, but the ideas are, get your pieces out, get castled, and maybe hold forth this idea of putting the knight there. And just for example, you can make that kind of a setup. Just be very, very super flexible with how you're going to attack the center. Because then you can still play here, but you can also still play d6. Okay? I think it's in not playing d4, d5, and instead knight f6. Sure, but if you play knight f6, you're just back in a normal position, so the move order doesn't matter. Well, exactly. Let me just show you that. Let me show everybody that. This is a normal Bogo Indian. And often after bishop d2, you play here. And here, very, very commonly, you play queen here, pawn up, and pawn up. There's another line, by the way, where black plays queen e7. Actually, it's a very famous line. But one of the ideas used to be that you would play knight c6, and, well, let me just do that. And it used to be that you wouldn't voluntarily take this off too quickly, but you can do that. And you can simply play for this kind of setup, like that. And the idea there is you're left with a good bishop, because your pawns are going to be on dark squares. Probably going to castle first, but so that's a typical setup, and pretty easy for black to play. Probably slightly better for white. Okay. That's a great question. The teepee, yes. Yeah, I think that's wrong, but it's kind of fun. It's very creative. I like that. All right, okay, let's do something. Let's show a game that I got sent. It's a blitz game. This is from David Brown, who played against Joel Benjamin on his show Banter Blitz on ICC. So this is a blitz game, so it's not going to be a real serious game. I'm not going to go over it in tremendous detail, but what he asked about is about playing this system. He asks, do you think the system I used is playable by patient calculators? So David is black against Joel Benjamin is white. Now remember, they're making these moves quickly. Joel plays an interesting move. It actually makes a lot of sense if G6 is played and there aren't too many other developing moves. You know, it kind of makes sense to kind of threaten H5 and see how black's going to handle it. Because, for example, if knight F6, which is a perfectly good move, maybe you're going to be getting this kind of move in really fast, this H5 move in. And if H5, then sometimes some piece can settle in on G5 very nicely, and that might favor white more than black. So David played this move, and Joel just continued right ahead. So maybe not much going on here yet, but now of course Joel's better developed, 2 pieces ahead, and has the center. So you might think, well, black's just playing badly, but that's not true. You can kind of get away with things like this. Now this is a very committal move because it commits this square. I think this is an instructive game in that sense. It leaves that square as a potential outpost or just weak point. It's not just that it's an outpost. It's that if white ever plays, let's just pretend that white played that, which he didn't. If black ever plays to free his game with F5, then there's a lot of little loose squares. For example, I mean, this is not a real position, but see that, how all these squares are falling? And that means white's going to slither his pieces into those squares and get a really good game. So now, that doesn't mean F5 has to be played, but I just wanted to show you that. Now, the main controversial thing about E5 is that white can take that, and that's what Joel did in this game, and take the queens off. And then he's going to gain more time attacking the king, and he's going to be way ahead in development because he's already 2 pieces ahead in development. On the other hand, black has a share of the center now, and no real weaknesses. Well, one weakness on F5, but nothing special. You know, his pawns being back here and having played slowly is kind of an advantage in the endgame because his pawns haven't committed very much. So there's no major problems here. Joel played there. I actually don't really think that's the best move. I think what white should do, I mean, there's a variety of ways to do this. You can do it with bishop e3. I think this one's very interesting. Just put your bishop here, castle queenside, and then start targeting the center. I think it's a good way to set up. But you might even play, just for example, let's make some moves for black. Something like this. Check. I may have done this wrong, but anyway. Now maybe this move. The idea is to play G4, knight G3, knight F5. I think that might be a good setup. Now you might say, well, what's wrong with knight G3? But the problem is it's hard to get all these moves in. So let me just see what happened here. Okay, black played that way, and once again, I kind of like B3 or bishop E3 here. This turns out, okay, such a natural move. It gains a tempo, attacking that pawn, gets another piece out, gets ready to castle. But now, this is why this is an interesting game. David played this move, similar to some other lines in the Pierce where this d takes e5 thing happens. And it's a great move because the bishop's attacked, and in fact white takes that and doubles black's pawns, but then the pawns defend that outpost, which is no longer an outpost, and that square, which was also very tempting for white's knights. So white's knights are very stuck right now. And you might think, okay, doubled pawns are weak, but they really aren't, are they? The only weak pawn is e5. Let's go a few more moves. So what happens is we get this characteristic kind of position where it looks like white's doing really nicely. Black's got a bad bishop, white's got a good bishop, and black has these bad pawns. But you notice that weakness, white will never get to that. You'll never get to put a piece over there. So it's not a real weakness. A lot of third-rank weaknesses are not really weak. This pawn is theoretically isolated, but there's no way you're going to attack it. So looking overall in this position, what's going on? Well, the only real weakness is this guy on e5. That's an issue. So what I would be doing is thinking about how to get to that pawn, and that's very hard to do. Now in blitz, of course, it's really impossible to figure out where to put your pieces. But one thought is to somehow get a bishop to c3, a knight on c4, a knight on d3 or g4, something like that. So you've got actually a bunch of pieces attacking that pawn. Very hard to do, probably almost impossible to do. I think black is actually okay in this position. I really like David's bishop e6 idea. That was an excellent idea. So that's really kind of cool. But let's just continue here. Okay, so Joel gets his pieces out and tries to reorganize this knight, but I'm not real sure where it's going. It has to get to c4, and it's going to be kind of hard to do. Let me show you that. I'm not going to make much comment on this. Well, another problem with black's position, though, by the way, sure, it's very solid, but what's his plan, a positive plan? The only move maybe he can make at some point is there, but this is a drawback to black's position, is that really there's no aggressive idea. He's really sort of just waiting for white. White, on the other hand, really doesn't have much of a plan either, even though he's got more active pieces. Finally, okay, so there he is attacking that. And let me just make a few more moves. Now white's trying to double. I like b5 in these positions. I think, for example, right now, or last move, b5 was a good move. Right here. Just stopping knight c4. And it's also a nice aggressive move, and it's got the idea of putting the bishop here where it's much more active. And black is fully equal here, by the way, I think. Absolutely equal, with no real problems. That's a good move, but it doesn't really stop b5. I think you should play b5 anyway. Because, white's not getting to the a file any faster than black is if these go off. So b5 is a good move. It just has a lot of, it serves multiple purposes, and there's no negative because it can't be attacked. Okay, anyway, he plays here, and the game has a sad finish, which is that it's a blitz game, and it's banter blitz. And now, once again, I suppose he could play b5. I wonder if he could there. Yeah, I think he could. I think he could just play b5 here. And sure, now maybe this time white's a little better because I suspect that in the ending this bishop's a little better than one of the knights. But I'm sure it's drawn if black plays well. And instead of that, black played here and forfeited. So it's not a great game from a competitive point of view because it's a blitz game, but it must have been fun to play on the online and in public. And I think this move, bishop e6, is wonderful. It really essentially equalized. I don't like black's opening very much, but after this move, bishop c4, and the funny thing is after bishop c4, bishop e6, it's kind of hard not to take it. You can play back, but that's kind of slow. And I think also black will play here followed by this, and might even take that with a knight and get two bishops. And if the bishop goes the other way, well, it's wasted time and it's very passively placed, so black must be okay. So it's a fun game. Okay, now next, no more comments yet. So let me show some another question I got sent. This is about the bishop f4 Queen's Gambit declined, which is big time right now, being played a lot. I would say, by the way, okay, black has to know this. I would say if he plays the Queen's Gambit declined, I would say, let's do it in the order that I was given, actually. I was actually given a game here. For some reason I have this in a particular order, so let me do that. Okay, so let's do it this way. Knight f3 first, and then c4. So there's a Queen's Gambit declined, right? That's the Queen's Gambit declined move. And one thing black has to do now, the classical move is bishop g5. And today, people are playing a lot of bishop f4s, and it's a fun system. I think it's nice to know it's white, too, because bishop g5 is so worked out, and there's such long lines, and black can have it kind of all memorized. And, well, he can have bishop f4 memorized, too, but it's not as easy. It's not that bishop f4 is a better move, but I think it keeps more pieces on the board in a more interesting way than bishop g5. At least if your opponent's really booked up and has played it for years. This is not easy. So now the question is, why can't black simply chase down that bishop? And what I said in my ICC video series, the question is, you give the following line in your ICC videos, and it's this line. Now what's the point there? Well, I want to save the bishop for a little while, and I'll explain that in a second. I could just go back, and eventually black's going to take that, and I'm going to get this file maybe, but I'm also going to have a slightly better center than black. This is still a bad bishop, restricted by that pawn. That doesn't mean white's better, but that would be what would happen. So what I suggested in my videos was go there first. And you might think at first that this is kind of, well, there's two things. You might think it's kind of worthless because of this move f6, and that's what the question's about. But you might also think it's worthless because of a move like knight c6 attacking the bishop. And one thing you can do in that case that's kind of interesting is you can play, let me get this right now. What would be the best way to do this? Maybe even h3 right away. Maybe, actually no, maybe more like bishop e2, sort of indirectly attacking this. And then if black does get rid of and get the bishop here, which we know is an advantage, this knight's attacked, it's going to have to come back. And then the minute this knight, this very good knight, is challenged, or, you know, by this or something, then you have this move f4. And this is a stonewall structure where you don't have the bad bishop. And that's kind of nice. It gives you good attacking chances. You've got, a lot of you have probably seen things like that. If the bishop is here, then the queen can come up attacking this way, or the rook can come up attacking the king side. So this is a good practical position. I like white here, even though it's two knights versus two bishops. It's kind of a fun way to play. So that's the idea of bishop e5, is that if black just tries to say, okay, I'm going to get rid of your bishop pair anyway, you just say, I don't care. Go ahead and take me, because I'm going to gain a lot of time and I'm going to have this beautiful knight on e5. Okay, so instead of that, you might say, okay, why not do this? And that was what the question was. Why not just get rid of it, and now I can win the bishop. And what good did bishop e5 did? Well, it did a lot of good, because this pawn structure is much more favorable. For one thing, you have a chance to play queen c2 or bishop here and create even more kingside weaknesses. That's a little bit of a weakness, but you're really going to have to move another pawn over there, and that kingside's going to get weaker. Also, this pawn is sort of awkward because that pawn is a little bit of a weakness on a potentially open file after e4. And it also gets in the way of the bishop coming to f6, which is a good square for that bishop. So that pawn on f6 is definitely hurting black. Now, whether black's okay here is a different issue. So anyway, in the videos I gave this and the question, oh, by the way, c6 is a good move because white's threatening to play. Let me just show you that. Let's say white plays some slow move. I don't know, something like this, for example, a popular kind of move in these kinds of positions. This is trouble because this guy's attacked. And if that happens, then you've got e4 coming, attacking it again. And that's not what black wants. And if he plays here again, you have e4. And then if he plays c6 to defend it, which he pretty much has to do, then I think we would just take that. I think I would just take it. Yes, I would. And then I will just develop, probably I'll castle kingside here by playing move like this, perhaps, attacking here. And then when he defends the kingside, just castle and put a rook on this open file where there's some weak squares. e6 is weak, and you can get it. This pawn is basically easy to attack. This pawn's not so easy to attack. And so white has the better game. I don't know if this is interesting to anybody. I hope it is a little bit. Sort of typical positional ideas. So what he asks, so that move is with the intention of taking back here, and then there's none of these tricks with queen b3 and e4 and everything. So white doesn't take it. White plays here, and that's in my lecture. And he asks, and I give the move g6 as the main line. We can come back to that. But he says, what's wrong with f5? And then he makes the very good comment. He says, I think g4 is a good response. What do you think? Is that correct? And I think it's absolutely correct. It's a fantastic move. I think it's even the best move. Now, obviously, he can't take that because this check is ripping the king apart, and that's going to be, in fact, it's almost made. It is made. Look at that, it's made, because after check, if the king comes up, it's made on g6. If the king comes back, queen g6 will mate in 2 moves. So, so he certainly can't take that. So the question is, what's white threatening? Well, he's threatening to take on f5. For example, let's say black makes a really slow move, like a dumb move. Then you can capture here. Now black really can't take with the rook because of bishop d3 and then mashing you on the king side. But if he takes with the pawn, you have captures, captures, knight takes. And you've won a pawn because queen takes allows bishop c4. So already there's a threat to win a pawn after g4. And what does that mean? Well, he has to do something in response to it. And what do I give here? I give g6 is my main move. If you know, he's going to lose a pawn no matter what. Same thing here, just takes and takes. How do you get your pieces out? This is a really bad piece. Where else can he go? He can go here, but it's the same thing. It's captures twice and c takes d5, so that's going to work. Well, not quite. I guess this is a little different because there's knight b4, but it's not going to work because there's going to be a bishop c4 move, maybe even right away. Now this is attacked 3 times, but it can't be defended because the b pawn's hanging. So that would win a pawn too. See, all these lines are winning pawns, all these natural moves. So that explains why that would probably be the main line. But then we just tag, I think. Let's see, is that what I have here? And then g4 again. Why not? Just g4 again. I mean, there are other ways to play, but I like this one. Same problem. You're threatening to take, and then either play win on the king side, or else take here and then sacrifice and win material. So what does black do? There's nothing much to do. Let's see if I give any thing else here. If, for example, here to get out of that pin, which was a real problem, right? Then still have that problem of taking and taking. Black just simply isn't developed. And now I think we can play knight e5, threatening knight g6 check. I'm not even sure if I need to show any more here. And then knight takes because the bishop's hanging on c8. Okay, so you can see the problems here when you get behind in development and you make too many pawn moves, basically. And maybe that's all I need to show. So that's why in the video lecture I give this move. Well, what's wrong with that move? Nothing horrible, but I'm really happy for white here because there's so many, because the king side's so weakened, and you do have that open file, which is nice also. So you could just play e4 and open the center, but look at this move's good. Threatening bishop takes g6. I think he has to play queen e8. Maybe now just play something simple like e4. You could also play really primitive ideas to go here and bring another piece over to the king side and threaten these kinds of moves. I mean, just for example, let's make a move for black. I don't know, this or something, and white goes here, which incidentally attacks here. But you're also threatening to play rook takes h7 here. You know, this kind of move. Because if he takes it, you win the queen. So that's kind of fun. That might be the easiest way to play, just knight e2. But you can also break in the center and have the better, a big center. Notice how undeveloped black still is. And that's fairly passive too. So that's the whole idea with g4. You're absolutely right. And this is a nice system for white to play, actually. And that's why, by the way, I would say overall this is one reason why black doesn't play knight h5 very much. It's not a common move. It's not a terrible move because he doesn't really have to play f6 there, but still. Anyway, thought I'd answer that question. I thought that was a very good question. It teaches you a lot about what's some sort of typical kingside action, and typically what's going on in these Queen's Gambit declines. And it's also a question that everybody should ask, because if you lose that bishop for no reason, then black just has two bishops, a bishop pair, and that's an advantage for black. Okay, so let me go ahead here. Do we have any more questions? We're running out of questions. Let me see. Oh, here we go. We got a bunch of questions. Wait, whoa. Look at that. I just wasn't scrolling down, folks. Oh my goodness, all kinds of stuff. Okay, after bishop e4, I prefer f5. Yeah, it's just that f5 is basically unsound. You know, this is in a lot of books. It didn't used to be in that many books, but now it's been shown pretty convincingly that white has it's almost a forced win, this position, that if he simply takes that. And I already showed this, maybe you already saw that, so I won't repeat what I showed. You can look back earlier, but this variation, even though it's a complete mess, has turned out to be extremely good for white. Black gets a huge disadvantage, and no matter what happens. It's really too bad. And it's been worked out. It was originally worked out 30 years ago or so by the British players mainly. And black has all kinds of beautiful options, and you can try all kinds of things, but in the end I think you'll find that white is winning this position, or very close to just directly winning. What should I play as white against the French defense? Advanced variation or exchange variation or something else? I have problems to protect my pawns in the advanced variation. I agree. I think Falafel, hi, he's asked great questions. We have talked about the French a lot on this show for obvious reasons, because I've written all these French books. But and we talked about this. I always played this. I just sort of bit the bullet, but you do have to know some theory. I think that's objectively the best move. For a practical player, this is just too easy for black. Black's always happy. I mean, you get rid of that. You get that out. We've talked about this. I've had two lectures or demonstrations of what to do as black, and I might even show some more in the future, because I'm often asked about the exchange variation as black. But I don't think white really wants to play this way. At least I don't. It's dull, and it's psychologically it's kind of disadvantaged, because it looks like you're just trying to draw, or you're allowing your opponent to imitate what you do, and so it's kind of negative psychologically. I think that's the soundest move. It's a little hard to learn also. You need to learn some theory, but at least it's safe, it's solid, and it gets a piece out, and it's fun. You get a lot of it. You get quite a few attacking chances. Now the only problem with knight d2 is that, in my opinion, most most defenses are completely equal. Most main defenses, even some irregular defenses, are probably equal. But so what? So what if they're equal? They're still interesting and fun. So that'd be my recommendation. And you can ask more specific questions by askiamwatson@chessclub.com. I'm glad to answer them. Oh, by the way, I totally agree that the advanced variation is very tough for anybody who's not a very strong player, because black gets this early initiative, attacking these pawns and breaking up the center. So sure, white can play this way and does. Good players can play this way, but they're white has to know how to defend a little bit in order to try and maintain his space advantage, and it's not easy. Okay, what else do we have here? Yeah, the D&E pawns, exactly. Franco Benoni instead of French. Yeah, good way to avoid that line. Okay, give me a second. E6, C4, C5, D5. ED with the 4 pawns and no modern. No, it's not though. No, not at all. Because you're taking with the E pawn, so it has nothing to do with the Benoni. The Benoni is with the C pawn capturing. So here, it's really completely different themes than the Benoni. Sure, there's no 4 pawns, but it turns out black has a basic space disadvantage, and he doesn't have a target like he does in the Benoni. So, for example, I don't know. Let's just say we make some moves here. I can even play this move now if you want me to. And actually, another problem with this line, now that I think about it, is this position. This is one of the basic positions. Black wants to get B5 in, but he really can't because A4 is going to come. And he doesn't have the usual break in any of his usual breaks on the king side, or pressure on the center like he does in the Benoni. So what does he do? Well, he can fianchetto his bishop, and he can also put the bishop on E7. Most people put it on E7, but white just has a basic space advantage here. And this is, I know, because I'd love to play this for black, because I'm a Benoni player, and I'd like to force white into a Benoni structure, but it doesn't happen, does it? It's just not happening here. White just has a simple space advantage that allows him to. It's not fun, in my opinion. It's not fun to play this position for black because you don't have any targets, and that pawn's quite strong. It's a cramping pawn, but you can play it. It has been played. It's just not terribly desirable, in my opinion. Good way to avoid that line. If you want to avoid it for white, you're trying to avoid this for white. Is that right? You're saying, is it a good way to avoid the timing off modern Benoni? No, unfortunately not. The only really good way to avoid it, in my opinion, there are several tries. Okay, if you want to avoid it, what I'd do is I'd set up this kind of position. This sort of thing. And after he's played here, don't play here. Don't play E6. Just play this way. And white's better in these positions, but it's a game. And what you do is you do play a Benoni now. You go ahead and you play E6. So you just wait and you play a true Benoni structure here, that kind of thing. And you take, and often white will take back anyway, and you'll be back in the main line of the Benoni, and you've avoided the timing off 4 pawns. But the problem, of course, is white can take with the pawn. And so what black usually does here, there's even a book, a DVD recently recommending this, a video recommending rook e8 right now. It's called The Slow Benoni. The idea is you just keep waiting. You play knight here, you play knight here. You might even sometimes play pawn here and switch back into sort of a King's Indian-ish kind of thing. The idea is that white might run out of moves before you run out of moves. The only time I ever played this system, I didn't even play E6 that early. I played this move, if I remember right. And I would usually play E6, but I kept open the position, possibly playing E5. And one thing you can do is you can just play all your usual queenside moves and think about playing for B5. You'll never get B5 in if white's careful, but in the meantime, white has to come up with a plan, and then eventually you can play either E6 or E5. The other way that top players played for quite a while was they left that pawn sitting there. It's not very popular anymore, but they left that pawn sitting there. And white would make various moves, and black would just sort of play a move like rook e8. All these lines are considered somewhat better for white, but they're games. Okay, I like the bishop to defend 2 connected pass pawns. Yes, thank you. I think that's probably easier in most positions. Fried Benoni sandwiches with mustard. Okay, we'll do that. I hope you saw your game, by the way. Yeah, I see ears has shown up. We showed your game. Bent Larsen used to combine the Dutch ideas with the Bogo. Yes, you can do that. I don't know if I want to demonstrate that, but basically all he's saying is that you're adding the move F5 in with the move Bishop B4 check. You can do that. now we have, the problems are, okay, here we go. Yes, what I've played myself and what I've recommended for white in my book, Strategic Chess Opening Repertoire for White, is to play the A3 lines. That's what I analyze in a lot of depth. He says another problem, okay, he thinks another problem is, I'm telling you, I think that's really the problem. But the other problem you're giving is knight c3, bishop b7, e3. Yeah, but that's just a Nimzo Indian. I don't think you're not gonna mind that. This is fine. Knight e2 is nothing special. If you know these lines, you'll be fine here. I don't think you'll. But I'm still well prepared. Yeah, you know this you'll be fine with. The other line is a problem. A3 is still a bit of a problem. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So that's a good point. He says this is a little bit awkward. He doesn't want to be chased back, but you know you can even play in a position like this if you want to. I'm pretty sure. Just don't even take this. Don't let that other knight come back. Just come back here. And this knight's not all that well placed for this position. You might just want to play this way. It's a pretty easy way to play. There's even a very cute way to play where you put the bishop here and the knight here, and then sometimes the knight switches over to the queen side. But the easiest way of all, see, actually, how's he getting this bishop out? It's not that easy, is it? I mean, if he plays a move like knight here or something. Oh, he plays d5, doesn't he? Excuse me. But what do we think of this position? I don't know if this is that great for white. Because what black does is he plays knight a6, c5, and maybe even a4, and he castles. This is a great question by TNSASTD. It's a good question. You can put your opinions here too, and you can also contradict what I'm saying. Sometimes I'm just wrong, because remember, I'm sort of just thinking about this on the spot, so I don't mind being told I'm wrong about it. Jonathan Russell, can you show how to play the black side of the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit? Yeah, I've got some ideas. I think there's several good ways to play. The Blackmar-Diemer Gambit, well, usually most people are going to play this right away, I guess, because if you play knight c3, first you run into what's called the Hübsch Gambit, where black takes, knight takes, and most people think black's already slightly better in these lines. So the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit proper is this move first, but then instead of playing here right away, which allows a lot of e5s and c5s and things, usually white plays here, and after black plays here, and there's really nothing better, because f5 is too many pawn moves for black. That's very easy for white to play. Maybe bishop f4, maybe bishop c4, and then an early f3. These are fun. So black plays here now and white plays here, and that's the Blackmar-Diemer. And you can decline it, but I don't really like declining it. I think you should just take it. Now queen takes has been pretty, it's just not played much anymore at all, and one of the main reasons, well, you can just leave the queen sitting there and develop. That's considered good for black, but you can also, I believe, don't quote me, but I think you can actually take this pawn. You can get bold and take that pawn. And white is considered not to have any really, really good way to attack here. I know it looks good for white. You know, there's knight b5s and bishop f4s and bishop b3s, but I think in the end, black's done well with that. But you can also just play very solidly. You have moves like bishop g4 sometimes just to harass that bishop. In fact, I'd recommend c6 here. I'll just tell you that. And I think we put that in our books too. Eric Schiller and I have that as our main solution. Most people play knight takes, overwhelmingly. The good players all play knight takes here. Now, I think a good line is what's called the so-called Ziegler defense, and that's to play this move c6 first. It's kind of a waiting move. It stops that. It's a move you want to have in anyway, but it kind of asks white what he's doing, what white's next move is. Wait, is this what I want? I have to think for a second. Why can't white just play the normal move here? What was I thinking? Now you'll notice that this fails to check, or even knight e5 maybe. Kind of, this is the famous bishop takes and then bishop takes mate, or bishop comes back, you just take it. And if he takes it, you have mate. So give me a second here. What was I doing? Oh, I guess here I'm just playing this move followed by e6. Yeah, and there's no particular tricks. Now it's true he's got this file, right? But it's very, very solid for black. Just bishop e7 and castles. This is an extremely solid position. It's very hard for white to play. If white plays here, threatening rook takes here, you just go back. Because if white takes that, you have an open file. Okay, now white has two bishops, but look how solid black's position is. And white really has a hard time finding some way through here. I think most people will admit that black's better here. Notice that that's black's good bishop, because all the pawns are on light squares. So black has a good bishop. He also has some possibility of kind of harassing. Maybe he'll go queenside. Maybe you'll play bishop d6, queen c7, knight here, castle queenside. and attack. So I think that's right. That's basically the Siegler defense. Yeah, bishop f5 is the right move here. This is actually in some of our books, this line. Now, what else can you play? Well, there's a lot of ways to play, but some of them are kind of risky. You know, there's the traditional just get your pieces out way, but it's amazing how many games white's won in this line, even though black is probably still better. This is a tough position to play with bishop g5 and bishop d3, and maybe, I don't know, queen. I don't remember white's normal strategy, but what happens is black gets to the point where he's castled and he's made some good moves, but then he has to make another move without getting in trouble on the king side. So I wouldn't play this way, even though it's perfectly reasonable. I'm trying to think what some of the other main defenses are to the Blackmar-Diemer. Sorry, I'm kind of drawing a blank here. Like what I really like to play here. What's wrong with that move? I guess white just gets the bishops. Yeah, maybe that's not so great. Yeah, so I would recommend that Siegler defense. I hope that's a good start anyway. And you can see what happened there is black got his pieces out, and then he gets castled, and then white's a pawn down, and black has no weaknesses. So that's I think a good way, Jonathan. Earliest known term of the Indian defense was the openings used against Banerjee. By the Indian player. That's kind of cool. Against John Cochran, who was a very famous player. You know, Cochran's Gambit we've talked about even, I think. The Cochran Gambit is where you give up a piece in the opening. I think it's basically refutable, but it's a lot of fun. It's a Petrov's opening. Well, we're never going to get to our main questions if I don't, the ones that I was sent, if I don't stop, if I don't get too distracted. It's this line. Now, normally white comes back and black takes, and we talked about this the other day. This kind of thing happens. But white has this funny option, which is very, very good if your opponent doesn't know what he's doing. It's a very nice attack, which is to get 2 pawns for the piece and a big center. Now, the best move is probably d4 right away, but there are other ways to play it. There's knight c3 is a well-known move, and bishop c4 check is playable too. Anyway, again, you can see what we think is the refutation in our book, Taming the Royal Chess Openings, to the Cochran. But it's fun. It's fun for white. White's idea is just bowl black over. Throw your pawns forward, throw your pieces up. And there's even there have been some very strong players that have played it, actually. Shirov played it. Who else? Topalov? Topalov played it? Not real sure, but only once. Okay, I had b5 a lot more than I thought. Looks like a draw. Oh, in that game. Yes, you did. And I think b5 was strong. On the other hand, you're not. The computer even likes black there, but I think it's just an equal game. Love bishop e6 ears. If you didn't see us comment on that, it's a great move, wonderful move. In fact, it makes bishop c4 look like a mistake. What shall I play with white against the French defense advanced variation exchange? Something else? We just talked about that. Wow, there's a lot of comments. This is wonderful. Thanks, guys. Look at this. Ben Feingold, never play f6 with black and f3 with white. Well, yeah, whatever. Although f3 with white is in so many great systems. So f6 with black, there aren't that many systems, but there are some. After this lesson is over, does Elmer play? Sure. Take up Jason, play him a game on chess or chess.com. Or ICC. I've got to promote ICC, of course. Ben got married. Okay, congratulations. Before f5, how about bishop b4 check, then f5? Oh, absolutely, yes. That's one of the main lines. I don't like it, though. I've tried to make this work as black because I play black in these lines. I play black in the. Well, let me do this the right order. Yeah, you can play bishop b4 check first, but you can also play. This is the one that would be fun to play. Because it turns out that if white plays any move here, any normal move here, then you can go ahead and take here and you just win that rook because the king has a place to go after this check. But white plays king f1, protecting that, and still stays a pawn ahead. And this is a great position to study. There's a lot going on, but somehow black really lacks compensation. It just doesn't seem to work in the long run. Now, before playing this, just fine. A lot of people play this. I think the best way to play this position. And now notice that knight c3 we're transposing back into a very main line, and that's quite a good move. I've played this myself quite a few times as black, so have my students. This is the problem, is that after that, white's got a big center and he's caught up in development. And this move isn't very dangerous anymore because it doesn't really threaten the center. So now all of a sudden you're way behind in development and he's got the center. But an interesting idea here is to play this little crazy move, threatening to take this and then take here. And if he defends it, which 90% of people are going to do, sometimes you can play an oddball move like Queen F6, attacking this again. Nigel Short played this way. Now, is it really good? I mean, did he really equalize? Probably not. But of course, the first idea is that you've got that same problem of losing this bishop, because if the bishop moves, this pawn falls. So that's the first idea. And then the second idea is that on something like this, you can maybe swing over here. Now, ultimately, or maybe better take first, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's not very exciting, is it? I think you better take first. And then depending how he takes back, for example, if he goes here, you might play either Queen F4 or Queen H6. And it's a game. White's better, I think. White's a little bit better regardless. And but it's an interesting way to play. You definitely stay alive. It's better than playing F5 and getting killed after E takes F5. So yeah, Bishop B4 check is definitely playable. But still better for White, in my opinion. Okay, can you explain the Evans Gambit? It's a big question. What do you think about it? I'm going to skip that for a second, but I will keep that for next week if I don't get to it already, because it's a very long, it'll be a long explanation. What do you think about playing the Dutch in reverse for White? That's also pretty long. It's called the bird's opening if you do it on the first move. Yeah, there we go. Alan says that. GM Hushamith won a good blitz game against Gustafsson with the Evans Gambit. Well, you know, if we don't get to it today, I can look up that game. We can use it as a starting point for talking about the Evans Gambit next week. I will do that if we don't get to it later. There's a trap in Queen F3. Okay, I may not know that particular trap. We're talking about the, I think we're talking about the Blackmar-Diemer. Is that right? You might want to confirm that, Remy Edits. The Queen F3, he's talking about, I think, you're talking about in the Blackmar-Diemer? We had a Queen F3 thing, and you said there was a trap. I'm sure there are traps, and I can't think what they are. You mean after Queen takes, for example? Maybe you need to be a little more specific about that. I may not even know the trap, and I certainly don't know which line we're... Oh, where we've got more. Oh, look at all of this. Look at all these questions. You guys are wonderful. Queen D4, Bishop E3, Queen B4. Yeah, I doubt if Queen B4 is best, by the way. I think Queen D8 would probably be best. Maybe even Queen G4 to gain a tempo. Maybe. I don't trust White's position here. I just don't believe it. Black has no weaknesses. White's not far ahead enough in development. But anyway, Queen B4 has the idea of maybe taking here, and White castles. Oh, I can see this coming. White castles. Oh, this is cute. Bishop G4. No, I don't think I have seen this one. Knight B5, threatening checkmate in one move. Oh, I see. And you can't play Queen takes because Bishop B5 is with check, and then you just take the Queen. So we're threatening mate in one move. That's the first thing. You're also threatening Queen takes B7. This looks like a complete slaughter. Do you see what I was saying about Queen takes? That'd be nice, because if this wasn't check, you could just take this next. But the problem is it's check, so you end up a Queen behind. So the point is, what are we going to do here? Queen going back looks like suicide, while Queen B7, if nothing else. Knight A6, there's also Queen B7 attacking everything. Maybe. No way. Just take the knight. Yeah, okay, beautiful. So Knight B5 just wins outright. Excellent. Thank you, Remy Edits. Very good. And I didn't know that. I've not seen that. You've already won a game with that. That's wonderful. Looks like the fried liver attack. Topalov played the Cochran Gambit, yes, against Shirov, I think. And also Kramnik. I think he played it against Kramnik, too. So there's a Kramnik game with black, too. Somebody played it. Maybe Shirov played it against Kramnik. Maybe that's right. I'm not sure how that went exactly. But there was a little period there where we saw two of those at the top levels. I think it's basically refutable, but a lot of fun. Okay. You have a plethora of knowledge. Thank you. Hey, folks, don't like to... Yeah, well, hopefully I'm teaching something. I mean, I thank you for saying didactic, because to me that's the point of this show, is that people can learn things. You're not going to always find your exact opening on here, but hopefully we can explain chess ideas. Fischer played F6 against Petrosian in their candidates match. Yeah, I mean, F6 is definitely played in a million different openings. I shouldn't give anybody an illusion. Yeah, that was the famous c5 line. So it went something like this here, and this is considered a mistake. Petrosian played this. Petrosian was never an opening expert at all. Of course, Fischer was the biggest opening expert in the world by far. So he won a lot of miniatures, that's for sure. He played this move, and you might say, oh, big deal, but the idea is that you're going to get e5 in because he can't stop it with d4 without losing the center, anyway, with tempo, whether you take with the bishop or the queen or the knight. So this f6 move is considered exclamation point, and it may be that black's already slightly better, although maybe that's an exaggeration. And if you just play a sort of a normal position like this, well, you don't have the kind of Indian system you would want as black. How do I describe that? I think the fact that he's played f6 really limits everything. Oh, well, for one, you don't have a pin here. If he had to play there, white would be perfectly happy. But of course, black's just going to play there and have a nice game, unless knight takes e5 works. Actually, what am I talking about here? Let me think about this for a second. Why can't I play knight e5? Oh, because that square is covered. So knight e5 immediately, there'd be this problem. King here, and really he's still a piece down, although this is, who knows, there might be some attack here. We'll worry about that later. So supposedly e5 gives black an advantage, you never know. Now if he plays here, well, maybe you have to play this, and I guess this is considered playable for both sides, probably. Can't be that bad for white, because it's just a Nimzo-Indian kind of structure, very typical structure. I'm thinking of a knight h4 move, like castles first, or a c4, just to get a Benoni-like position. This is fascinating. I'll have to look this up afterwards. This is the famous Fischer-Petrosian game. Or Smith, I'm sorry, was it? Yeah, Petrosian, that's right. And he did win. Christoph Saliki's favorite opening with white is the English opening with black. The Benko, what are your favorite openings with white and black? Well, I've played pretty much everything with white and black over the years. I haven't played that much chess overall compared to a lot of these people, but when I was white, I started with e4 like everybody else, and had a lot of fun with it. And then I switched to the English opening. I wrote a 4-volume work on this, and later works on it, and played that for years. I had a lot of luck with the English opening. I had a lot of fun with the English opening. And then as I got older, I started playing d4, and I've been playing that pretty consistently with an occasional c4 thrown in. And as black, well, it depends, of course, what white plays. If he plays e4, of course, I'm well known for the French because of all my books. But I did at one point play intentionally a different opening every single game just to keep myself kind of fresh. So I played Elyakins, I played the French. I didn't play e5. I never liked e5. I played the Pirts. I played, and I didn't like Cochran very much. But I played knight c6 sometimes. So I played all these openings at one point, and I played the Sicilian, probably second most, as well as the French. And then later, as I got older, I just played the French just about every game, just because I found you really need to keep up with the theory of those other lines, and it was getting pretty hard to do. So those are my favorite openings. And it's against d4. For years, I played either the King's Indian or the Benoni. And I have played Nimzo-Indian kind of positions. I've never played d4. Oh, I have played d4, d5 because I played the Cochran a lot. So I played that quite a lot. But I've never been a big d4, d5 player against, generally. What else? I guess that's it against, well, moderns once in a while, just throwing a modern in. And the English defense, I usually played not against this. I didn't use that order that much. I have used it, but of course they can play here. And then I wasn't in any of my major defenses here if they play like a Queen's Gambit kind of thing. So, so I tended to play the English defense against the English that way. I had some really good results, actually, even against Grandmasters. So that was nice. Okay, we're moving on here. Can you show the black side of the King's Gambit? This is quite funny because I was going to get to that dragon stuff from last week. I've got a ton of games to show. But this is fun. I think everybody's enjoying it. Do you know what happened to Morozevich? He is playing less. I think I saw something this year that he played in. But and I think he might play in the Bundesliga, which is a fantastically strong league. But generally, it seems like he's much less active, doesn't it? And also, you don't see him getting invitations to the top tournaments because his rating has gone down. But I don't know the answer to that question. He always said he was going to quit chess, and he wasn't that interested in chess when he was young. That you could get boring or something, which is funny because he plays such interesting chess. Where can I find your live broadcast schedule? Well, it's every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll see that's what's going on so far, and you can always find things on ICC. By the way, all of the if you're an ICC member, or even maybe if not, you can at least go to the events page and see when all the different broadcasts are. Can you show us how to play the black side of the King's Gambit? We have looked at that before, and I've given some very superficial ideas, but I can do that. Let me just see if there's questions I should be getting to. Some of those earlier questions about the Evans Gambit were very interesting. He plays checkers. How interesting. Drafts. There we go. Ristic Moisevich over the board blitz games are my favorite to watch. I'll bet they're so brilliant. Jonathan, you must watch the King's Gambit game where poor Adams. Yeah, I'm sure Adams is brilliant against the King's Gambit because he's played it at E5 his whole life. Adams is one of the few one-opening players left. He's always played the Indian systems. He always plays 1E4, E5. It's white. He always plays the same systems. So I bet he's very, very good against the King's Gambit. Yeah. Okay. So okay. We've got some general questions. The King's Gambit question, the Evans Gambit question, and there was one other earlier. Maybe real quick, I'll mention what I've said before about the King's Gambit. There's all kinds of fun things to play against the King's Gambit. Even a system like this is really perfectly good. This is Keen's defense, kind of loosening up that diagonal, and then there's question. You're threatening to take in some lines. It's kind of fun. I think it's fully equal. What I used to play or recommend for my students, because I never played it, I don't think, is go ahead and accept it. Now, of course, there's Bishop C4, and you have to learn a line against that, but it's not that hard to do. If worse comes to worse, you can play the so-called modern line with this. And if he takes it, you play here. And if he plays here, then there's a couple different moves. But anyway, you can always play that. And often he'll take the other way, obviously. But against the main line here, I always thought this was just a perfectly good line to play here. Oh, I'm sorry. If I'm going to get into my main accepted lines, I think I'll do what a lot of people do, play this little trick. Play that first. That's called the Falkbeer counter gambit if you decide to turn it into a gambit. White pretty much has to play this move, or often, usually does, although knight c3 is sometimes played. And then instead of playing the Falkbeer counter gambit, which is this, or even c6 is played sometimes, and you're just a pawn down, but you have a cramping pawn. That's a famous line, but white's a little better. You can play here, and that's the same thing as playing. Takes here, here, here. See that position? That's the same position with black to move now, and he plays knight f6. But you've avoided bishop c4, so you don't have to worry about bishop c4. If you allow this, you're allowing that order, which my student Abby Marshall used to play. She won the National High School Decker Championship, so that was pretty fantastic. Anyway, she used to play this line, and we studied her like crazy. It was really a lot of fun. And if you want to avoid that, this is one way to do it. Play there. And there's not much else to do except take here. This position's pretty awful because you're threatening queen d4, or at least it's not very attractive. It might be okay, but I don't know anybody that likes it. So pretty much most people are going to take this, and now you take, and now when he plays here, stopping queen h4 check, you play here, and you're back in that line I just showed you, the modern defense to the King's Gambit. I think this is a very easy line to play. But you have to study the lines and see what you decide. All the theory says that it's equal. So this is a fairly simple way to play against the King's Gambit. Let's see what we got here. Let's watch the King's Gambit. Ivanchuk is a draft player. Okay, interesting. Curiously, he's about the only expert strength in checkers. Yeah. Well, that's like Go. You know, I remember with Go, you know, you can become a very good player, but you just have to take forever. It's like any other game. You have to spend a long time studying it and thinking about it, and reading the theory and working out things. So it doesn't surprise me. It's very hard to become a great player in any board game. Just because you're a smart guy. I mean, how good would Ivanchuk be at chess if he, just sort of took it up and didn't play it professionally for the first, between ages 6 and 16 or something? Okay. Go back up there. Well, no, maybe I'll do the thing from that. Oh, too late already. 4:05. Okay, so So what I'm going to do next week, by the way, is I really want to show you this because Elliot Winslow was on the show and he showed us this. He asked this great question about the dragon. So I've done a lot of research on it, and I think some of you are probably interested in the dragon. If not, you should probably say, "Nah, we don't want to see that." You can put that in the comment section. But he asked about these moves in the dragon, and I looked up some games, and it's actually fascinating history that a lot of these lines are sort of being neglected, or they're kind of misinterpreted. And but he asked about the old bishop g5 move in in this position, bishop b5 here, bishop g5, and he also asked about king b1. And I have interesting things I think to say about both those moves. This is Burns' old move. And just to give you a flavor for this, I looked it up in correspondence chess, which is really a good sign of how people think about various openings, because after all, you've got the computer and all the books available. And in correspondence chess, in the main line, Black won with a 400-point performance rating advantage, an overwhelming score. And yet, next week, I guess I'll show you that I think White has a chance of getting an advantage in these lines. So maybe bishop g5 will be revived. Anyway, that's something to think about for next week, and I wanted to point that out just because there might have been other people waiting for that answer and didn't get to it this week. So let me go back, since we've got a few minutes. Can you explain the Evans Gambit? Okay, let's talk about the Evans Gambit. Not that I remember the theory very well, but okay. So this is the famous way that chess, many chess games started in the 19th century, and still do, and in fact are increasingly starting again because the Ruy Lopez is looking so difficult to play against, that especially with the Berlin defense, of course, and also even all the main lines of the Ruy Lopez are working well. So for variety, a lot of people are playing this move, and then instead of playing any of the main lines like the Evans Gambit or C3 or anything, they're just playing D3. So it's very similar to the Ruy Lopez line with D3 here. So a lot of people are playing that. Now, the classical lines were not like that. Now of course we would have to talk about the two knights defense too, but the classical lines there are not D3. The classical line is not D3, it's C3. I'll get to the Evans Gambit in a second. And then when Black defends, you're trying to play for D4. And you're trying to break through. And there's all, countless centuries of theory here. But early on, that was sharing a spotlight and with what many world champions played. And for example, Morphy played this. Chigorin, really almost everybody played this thing called the Evans Gambit. Now, what's the point of the Evans Gambit? You're giving away a pawn as White. Now, remember, White can give away pawns more easily than Black because he's a tempo up to begin with. So if you can gain a tempo or two, that might be worth a pawn. So you can trust White Gambits a little more than Black. And in fact, the Evans Gambit, up to fairly recently, was considered sound. Kasparov himself played the Evans Gambit, which is an amazing thing. It implies that it's probably at least playable. Of course, his record was very positive with it as White. Now, what are you doing? Why would you make that move? Well, it gains a tempo on the bishop, doesn't it? I mean, it forces Black to do something. And if Black retreats, which is called the Evans Gambit decline, which, by the way, I think is a very good answer, at least you've got chances to expand on the queen side, for example, and try to chase down those pieces. You might have b5 with tempo, and you've got some initiative. But bishop b6 is a good move, by the way. If Black takes that way, of course, you're winning a center pawn for a flank pawn, and you aren't even down material. That's good for White. Although I don't know if that's true in this exact position. You know something? I don't think you would play knight takes. Yeah, I'm really worried about bishop d4 and queen f6 and moves like those. Oh boy. Huh, shows what I know. Yeah, because if d4, you're taking that because you've got a fork here. Someone's got to look this up. I have no idea. So maybe you could play knight takes and White would just play the normal gambit. Would just play back and then play d4. And let's just hold that thought, because after bishop takes, you can get that position also. So c3, bishop. Now bishop usually will go back here, and the idea of that move is that after d4, this pawn is pinned and can't recapture. But let's look at bishop c5 for a second, because you'll get the same basic kind of position. White goes here, attacking, and let's just say Black takes it, for example, and then doesn't check, just plays back. What's going on in this position? Well, White suddenly has two massive center pawns, and it's his move. He's ahead in development, and he's able to advance these pawns and attack. So that's the idea. He's gotten a big lead in development by giving up just one pawn. And it's hard for black to develop because if he plays moves like that, he's going to get hit by this at some point, probably d5 first, but that's beside the point. Actually, it's pretty strong, isn't it? Because this is actually unplayable, I think. I think you're just going to get killed here. Some bishop a3 idea. Oh, you're winning a piece, aren't you? Because if bishop e6, you have d5. Okay, or bishop g5. Anyway, okay, so that's a horrible move. So you really can't play knight f6 without getting chased all over the place. So what does that mean? Well, somehow you've got to get developed. And it's not easy. You're going to have to play d6 here. And then white just keeps developing. Like Morphy played knight c3 in this position. It's not the only move. d5 is actually very interesting. Bishop d5 followed by bishop b2, followed by bishop d3. It's kind of underrated. Anderson used to play this way. And he was criticized for it because Morphy played knight c3 and had such luck. But this position's not easy for black, in my opinion. This is not a simple position. Anyway, I'm getting off the subject. The point is to get a big center in return for, because think about it, right here, black has a full share of the center. White's no better in the center than black is. And all of a sudden, what's the ideal center in chess? Well, the ideal center is to get both pawns abreast on e4 and d4. So you've gotten that, and you've gotten it with a gain of time. And black doesn't have any center yet. So that's sort of the idea. Now, usually black's going to play here, and then white can go ahead and play d4, for example, and then castle, for example, threatening to take. And if black gets too greedy, there's too many open. There's tremendous number of open lines. For example, if he takes here, I don't know if it's queen b3 already. I think it probably is. This position is awfully hard for black. He's 2 pawns up, or is he 3 pawns up? But I guess he's 3 pawns up temporarily, but he's going to lose this one back. It's really almost impossible to defend this position. Maybe you can do it, but nobody would really want to. There may be other ways to play that too. So what happens is black does something else. For example, I think this position is pretty interesting. Knight here, oh, I'm sorry, after castles. If black plays, for example, here, I think this is pretty interesting, and get a counterattack this way. That's a defense you can play. Maybe only about even, but it's fun. It's a sort of interesting way to play. And anyway, you get the idea. The idea is that white's going to get a big center, and black's probably going to want to do something about that. And he might, in fact, play, this Lasker defense thing with this too. Maybe with the idea of bishop g4. So I don't know, that wasn't much of an answer, but the basic answer of explaining it is that you give up a center, you give up a flank pawn in order to establish a big center. You'll notice that even though white has 2 less pawns on the queen side, he has 1 extra pawn. He has a central majority, 2-1 in the center, which, as we know from the Sicilian defense, is worth quite a bit. Okay, I was asked about the bird, or Dutch reversed. I'll try to address that next week. I'm just scrolling down here to see what else we've got here. Okay, we're still on the. I played 12 times against him. Who is that? Wait. Andrei Ostrovsky we're talking about? Whoa, look at this. Hang on. Engine analysis on the Blackmar-Diemer. Okay. Yeah, I sort of believe that. Maybe as a final thing here, since we're getting really short of time, we've gone way over what we usually do. We'll finish that Blackmar-Diemer thought. Now remember, this is not the main line by any means. Well, I'm sorry, I did the wrong order there, but that's okay. Remember, you could have played knight takes e4 there. But we're still talking about this move, which people just don't play, but very much at all. And we were showing some reasons why. This is the main line, so keep that in mind. But if queen d3, which I was saying, I think you can simply grab this. Although there's other things to do. I think in our book we just recommend this. It's quite good. But I think you can get away with this move. And what Big Karpov is saying is that after bishop e3, I was talking about making this move, which I think is pretty strong. But he's saying that the engine says, go ahead and play check first, and then play here. It may not be that much difference, but maybe a little bit more weakness for white because of the g3 move. Anyway, black is a pawn ahead. I don't know if white can really justify this. I'm sorry, black here is 2 pawns ahead. My fault. Black's 2 pawns ahead, and that's a lot. Now, there are a lot of times, a lead in development will help you counter that, but here the queens are probably going off. So, interesting line anyway. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. And Big Karpov says he likes my bishop's opening repertoire. Well, that's nice. We can talk about that too. That's in my ICC lecture series. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. Jason, can you subscribe on Andrei Ostrovsky, please? Okay, so that must be some okay, learning videos. Interesting. Okay. I hear the Danish Gambit is a fun way to play with black allows. It can be. It can be a lot of fun. Don't forget to like this video stream. Absolutely. Give us a like. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for going on so long, and I'm going to get to that dragon stuff next week. If you're interested in the open Sicilian and crazy dragon variations, I think you'll really like it. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week.